My parents passed away early, and I was fostered by my father's comrade-in-arms in the countryside. With David's parents' support, I married my childhood sweetheart, David, whom I had grown up with, but I never knew that he had always loved someone else. After marriage, he refused to touch me, yet he let me bear the blame for being infertile. My in-laws resented me and, instead of showing sympathy, they brought over 2 children from distant relatives for me to raise. David, unconcerned, left for the army and barely returned once a year. 18 years later, I raised the children into successful young adults. They were admitted to Tsinghua University. David came back home with another woman for their graduation banquet, and in front of everyone, he announced that those 2 children were his and his lover's biological children. I watched as their happy family of 6 celebrated together, realizing I was the only one left in the dark. In despair, I walked away in anger, only to accidentally fall off a cliff in the darkness. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the first year of my marriage. Chapter 1. David's mother sat in the main hall, while his father smoked his pipe beside her. The small ancestral hall was packed with scattered relatives, making the cramped space feel even smaller. Aside from David's parents and David himself, who was holding 2 children, everyone else was watching me out of the corner of their eyes. I stood at the door, silent. David's mother cleared her throat and said, "Lily, you came at the right time. Your third aunt just gave birth to twins. She already has 3 children. So when she heard about your struggles with pregnancy, she decided to send them here to ask if you'd like to raise them." I lifted my gaze and swept across the room. Among the crowd, Sandra was watching David tenderly, her eyes filled with affection as she gazed at the children in his arms. So, even back then, Sandra had already appeared in my life. Everyone was waiting for my answer. David's mother, on the other hand, looked completely at ease, as if she was certain I wouldn't refuse. After all, in the past year of marriage, she never failed to ask about my womb at every meal, morning and night, until my face turned pale with shame and guilt. I turned to David and asked, "Do you want to raise them?" David seemed surprised that I was asking him. He frowned slightly. "That's women's business. It has nothing to do with us men. If you want to raise them, I won't stop you." "Good, then I won't raise them. But since you've decided to take them in, you must do it wholeheartedly, so as not to wait." "What did you just say?" David froze, staring at me in disbelief. The room fell silent. Even the hushed whispers died down. I calmly repeated, "I'm only 19. I might still conceive. Why should I raise someone else's children?" David's face darkened with disapproval. "How can you be so unreasonable? Your aunt meant well. I never expected you to be this short-sighted." I countered, "Didn't you just say you wouldn't interfere? So why are you so agitated now that I've said no?" David was at a loss for words, his eyes widening as if he couldn't believe I had the audacity to go against him. My mother-in-law stepped in to smooth things over. "Lily, don't say such things in anger. I know you like these children. If you take them in, I'll help you raise them." My father-in-law exhaled a puff of smoke and added, "Since you've decided to take them in, we'll hold a ceremony tomorrow and officially register them under your and David's names in the family records." I was speechless. In my past life, my mother-in-law's so-called help was nothing more than watching over me while treating the twins coldly. As for washing their clothes, covering their expenses, and tutoring them in their studies, those responsibilities fell entirely on me. They only cared about enjoying the fruits of my labor. When had they ever considered me? Now, watching them make decisions on my behalf as if I had no say, I raised my voice slightly and said, "I won't raise them. If you register them under my name, I will divorce." After saying that, I ignored their stunned expressions, turned around, and walked toward the village mailbox. Chapter 2. I retrieved the letter addressed to me. As I tore it open, my eyes turned red with emotion. Inside was a 100 yuan banknote along with a stack of food and fabric ration coupons, extremely precious resources in the scarcity-stricken 1980s. The sender was Professor Oliver, my parents' university mentor, who had always treated me like his own granddaughter. Unfortunately, in my past life, I only discovered his silent support after I had spent 18 years raising David's children and getting them into Tsinghua University. By then, I learned that all these years, His letters and financial aid had been secretly taken by David's parents. In the mailbox, I also found my Tsinghua University admission letter, which, in my past life, had been hidden away by my aunt's family. They had done everything to break my wings and trap me in their household, ensuring I had no choice but to toil away for them like a servant. At the village entrance, I greeted the shopkeeper auntie at the general store and told her I needed to make a phone call to an old friend of my parents. She had watched me grow up in my aunt's household and understood the bitterness of being raised under someone else's roof. Out of kindness, she refused to take my money and let me use the phone for free. Coincidentally, she had to step out to make a delivery, so she asked me to watch the store for a while. Grateful for her generosity, I made a silent promise to repay her someday. Then, I dialed the number for Beijing. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. An elderly yet firm voice came from the other end. "Hello. Who is this?" Choking up, I responded, "Grandpa Oliver. It's me, Lily. Lily, my little girl. You finally remembered this old man." Grandpa was overjoyed to hear from me. When he learned that I had once again been accepted into Tsinghua, he became even more excited. "Your parents' spirits in heaven must be so proud of you." I told Grandpa Oliver about my current situation and informed him that I would be heading to Beijing in 3 days to prepare for university. After hearing about my struggles, his mood darkened, and he deeply regretted not being able to protect me back then. Upon learning my decision, he was extremely supportive and insisted that I stay with him first. After hanging up, I exhaled a long breath of relief. I carefully hid the letter and my admission notice in a place only I knew. Just 3 more days, and I would finally rewrite my fate. Chapter 3. By the time I got home, most of the relatives had already left. Only my in-laws, David and Sandra, remained, each holding a child. I walked in quietly without making a sound. I heard Sandra's worried voice. "David, what if Lily refuses to raise them?" David's cold, firm voice responded, "She has to, whether she wants to or not. In a month, I'll be leaving for the army, and you'll be going to university. What will happen to the children then?" His mother chimed in, "Sandra, don't worry about it. You focus on your studies. A mother should be educated like you. Lily grew up in our household. She wouldn't dare disobey us." His father, acting like the head of the family, gave the final word. "That's settled then. This family isn't hers to make decisions in." I felt nothing. Any emotions I once had already been worn down to nothing in my past life by endless toil and exhaustion. I stepped inside. The 4 of them were startled, their eyes carefully scanning my face to gauge how much I had overheard. I looked at Sandra, perhaps feeling guilty. She turned her head away, avoiding my gaze. David stepped in front of her, blocking my view, and said seriously, "This is my cousin, Sandra. She got accepted into the teacher's college, so she'll be staying with us for the next month." I nodded without saying a word. I pretended not to hear my mother-in-law let out a quiet sigh of relief behind me. After dinner, I went straight to my room and started packing. I separated everything related to David, placing them in a pile away from my belongings. There wasn't much that truly belonged to me, just a single winter coat and a few thin summer dresses. Compared to the wool coat Sandra was wearing, my clothes weren't even worth the price of half a meter of her fabric. If I remembered correctly, her coat was made using fabric ration coupons that Grandpa Oliver had sent for me. Even though Grandpa Oliver had sent me a generous sum every month, most of it had been pocketed by my mother-in-law, leaving only scraps for me. They had raised me for all these years, so I would consider that money as compensation for their so-called kindness. But as for Grandpa Oliver, I would find a way to pay him back in full. For once, David stepped into my room without even knocking. He tossed a woolen scarf onto my bed, his tone condescending, as if throwing a handout to a beggar. "I've neglected you since we got married. I brought this back from the city. It's for you." I stared at the scarf. Its pattern was identical to Sandra's wool coat. Most likely, it was made from leftover scraps, so he had even gone through the trouble of collecting leftover fabric to bring back to me like some kind of grand gesture. Seeing that I remained silent, David assumed I was deeply touched by the scarf. Seizing the moment, he added, "I'll be leaving for the army in a month. You need to take better care of the children." Then, after a pause, he added, My parents have worked hard raising us. You should be more considerate and help out around the house, do the dishes, the laundry, and don't act like some spoiled wife who doesn't lift a finger, like you did tonight." I almost laughed out loud. "You still have a whole month before you leave for the army. How come I don't see you helping your parents with housework?" David's lips pressed into a thin line. After a long silence, he finally muttered, "Of course. I'll do my part to help." Then, his gaze landed on a notebook and a woven bracelet he had given me long ago, now placed in the corner of my desk, alone, abandoned, like discarded trash. His expression darkened. "Why did you dig those out?" I casually replied, "Just sorting things out. Time to throw away what needs to be thrown away." David's brows knitted together, an unfamiliar irritation stirring within him. He stepped forward, about to rummage through my packed belongings. Before I could stop him, a sickly sweet voice called from the bathroom, "David, the water's gone cold." David immediately turned away and rushed to heat up the water for Sandra. That night, he never returned. Chapter 4. I slept until noon the next day, but my mother-in-law was too distracted to scold me. She paced back and forth in the main hall, her face anxious as she muttered under her breath, "How could it not be there? Where did it go? Could it be that he didn't send it this time?" I watched her with amusement, fully aware of what was happening. "Mom, what are you looking for?" Her eyes flickered with hesitation as she glanced at me, but she was certain that I couldn't possibly know about this matter. "Nothing. The children are hungry. Go prepare their milk." I chuckled. David should do it instead. After all, in a month, he'll be leaving for the army, and he won't get to see them anymore. Before she could stop me, I darted out the door. I knew she had gone to the mailbox today and didn't find the money and ration coupons that Grandpa Oliver had sent me. She must be panicking right now. In my past life, the money had been secretly used for everything in the household, except for me. David had used this money to bribe his way into a good position in the army. With his scheming and ability to curry favor, he had climbed the ranks, and 18 years later, he had even become a minister. Sandra's university tuition and expenses? Almost entirely funded by the money from my letters. They shamelessly enjoyed the benefits I brought while acting as if it was their rightful due. Did they really think the world worked that way? I arrived at the village's youth association, a gathering place for David, Sandra, and their group of friends. Before I even stepped inside, I heard one of David's childhood friends teasing, "David, you dote on Sandra so much. Can you really bear to let her leave for university?" Sandra nestled into David's embrace, her voice shy but sweet. "What nonsense are you saying? I only see David as an older brother." The friend laughed. "Older brother? More like a lover." The whole group burst into laughter, filling the room with a lively atmosphere. David, grinning, held Sandra close. "When you go to Beijing, don't forget to think about me and the kids." Sandra shyly lifted her head, planted a kiss on his cheek, and replied, "I will." Then, the conversation shifted to me. David's expression cooled significantly. I heard him say, "Lily is good at enduring hardships. She's better suited to stay home and take care of my parents and the kids. When it comes to talent and education, she can't hold a candle to Sandra." It felt like a hammer struck my heart, even though I had already realized the truth. Hearing such ruthless words still made me burn with anger and resentment. I felt injustice for the 20 years I wasted in my past life, for the education I gave up, for the self I sacrificed. At that moment, a young woman entered the building and noticed me standing outside. Surprised, she grabbed my hand and pulled me in. "Sister-in-law, what are you doing out here? Come in." The lively atmosphere inside instantly fell silent. Everyone turned to look at me, their faces stiff and uneasy. David and Sandra immediately stood up and put some distance between them. Sandra looked at me timidly. "Sister, you came without making a sound." David's gaze was filled with annoyance. "Why aren't you home watching the kids? What are you doing here?" I glanced at the lipstick stain on David's face and smirked mockingly. Sandra quickly grabbed a napkin and, in an attempt to cover it up, wiped at David's face in an overly obvious manner. "Sister, it's my fault. David and I were just joking around." David hesitated for a second, but then, regaining his composure, he straightened and spoke with confidence. Why are you explaining? Sandra and I grew up together like siblings. There's nothing to hide. Perhaps worried that I would expose them. His tone grew irritated. Lily, stop being so paranoid all the time. Do you know why I don't want to come home? It's because of this attitude of yours. If only you had even a little of Sandra's gentleness. David. I interrupted him. Only then did he seem to realize he had misspoken, and he awkwardly shut his mouth. I spoke in a calm tone, completely ignoring the embarrassment on his face. The 2 kids you insisted on adopting yesterday are hungry. Your mother is calling you home to feed them. David's face darkened, but he couldn't refute me. After all, I had already refused to adopt the children, so the responsibility fell on him. With no other choice, he followed me home. Sandra bit her lip and trailed behind. Chapter 5. At the dinner table, my father-in-law casually informed me that the children's names had already been added to the ancestral records. I nodded and said nothing. My mother-in-law glanced at me and then subtly signaled to David. Autumn is coming, and Lily's clothes are old. David, take Lily to the city in 2 days to buy some new ones. David looked at me for a moment before nodding in agreement. Sandra, sitting beside him, pouted with displeasure. Sandra should come too. It's on the way anyway, she said. My mother-in-law glanced at me again. I simply nodded, showing no reaction. The whole family seemed a little surprised. After all, just a few days ago, I had humiliated them outright by refusing to adopt the children. But in my mind, I was already planning. Going to the city meant I could buy a ticket and leave. I wouldn't even need an excuse. Perfect. David, I can finally leave you. I had waited 2 lifetimes for this day. 2 days later, just before dawn, David gently pulled Sandra out of bed, patiently helping her wash up before coming to knock on my door. But before he could, I had already opened it. David visibly paused in surprise when he saw me, already fully dressed and prepared. Why are you carrying such a big bag? I adjusted the strap of my bag, keeping my expression neutral. I packed some food. Sandra bounced out from behind him, wrinkling her nose in distaste. Sister, we're going to the city, not farming in the fields. Why are you bringing dry rations? Do you think there's no food in the city? David, hearing this, also sneered slightly. Fine, bring it if you want. Just don't whine halfway through and ask me to carry it. Their words didn't dampen my mood one bit. I calmly reassured them. Don't worry, I won't. The only transportation to the city was the village chief's livestock truck, usually used to transport pigs. In this era, owning a vehicle was already a huge privilege. David carefully helped Sandra into the truck, thoughtfully spreading a layer of newspaper on the seat so her clothes wouldn't touch the dirt. Meanwhile, I climbed up on my own, struggling slightly but eventually finding a random corner to sit in. An auntie from the neighboring village saw how intimate David and Sandra were and couldn't help teasing. Oh my, you two must be newlyweds, right? So affectionate, even more thoughtful than my old man when we first married. Sandra froze in embarrassment, and David stiffened, clearly at a loss for how to respond. It was the village chief who spoke up first, eager to clarify. Sister, you've got it wrong. That over there is his real wife. The auntie blinked in confusion before glancing at me in the corner. Her gaze was filled with undisguised bewilderment. Still, she didn't say much, just muttered under her breath. Didn't the old dynasty fall already? How was he openly doting on his concubine while ignoring his wife? Though she spoke softly, the cramped truck meant that everyone could hear her words clearly. Sandra's face flushed red, and she awkwardly pulled away from David. David, feeling thoroughly humiliated, shot me a vicious glare when no one was looking, but I ignored the childish drama. My mind was focused on the bag in my hands, because inside, I carried my future. Chapter 6. After getting off the truck and as the crowd dispersed, David's expression grew even more impatient. His tone was cold and dismissive. Here's 5 yuan. Buy yourself some clothes. Be back here at 3 in the afternoon. With that, he threw the crumpled 5 yuan note at me before turning away, wrapping his arm around Sandra as they left without a second glance. Before disappearing, Sandra turned back and gave me a look of pity. I bent down, picked up the money, and tucked it into my pocket, even though I knew his mother had given him 50 yuan. In his mind, I was only worth spending this much. But it didn't matter anymore. I had already written to Grandpa Oliver, telling him to never send me money again. Everything he had given me in the past, I would use it to buy my complete freedom. I turned and walked toward the train station, and the moment I sat on the train bound for Beijing, the tears I had held back for decades finally fell. For so many years, trapped in the village, I never imagined there could be another life for me. Having been sent to David's family at the age of 5, he was the man I spent the most time around, and inevitably, I fell in love with him. But to him, I was only ever a little sister, a servant, a tool, never his wife. Perhaps this love I had held onto for more than a decade was nothing but a stubborn obsession. If my parents could see my past life, knowing that I had wasted it serving a man's family, they would surely be furious. But none of that mattered now, because heaven had given me another chance. Maybe this was my father and mother's wish, not wanting to see me suffer again. This time, I would live for myself. I hoped that my future would shine brighter than ever before. Chapter 7. Upon arriving in Beijing, the first thing I did was visit the capital hospital, where I handed over a few strands of hair to the testing department. Afterward, I followed the address to Grandpa Oliver's house. It had been many years since I last set foot in Beijing. Standing before the imposing and dignified villa, I felt an unexpected wave of nervousness and unease. The young maid at the entrance spotted me, her face lighting up in pleasant surprise. "Are you Miss Lily? The master instructed me that you'd be arriving in Beijing these days. Come in quickly. He's playing chess right now." I nodded and stomped my feet several times at the doorstep, making sure all the mud from my shoes had fallen off before stepping inside. To my surprise, Grandpa Oliver's home was much quieter and emptier than I had imagined. In the spacious living room, 2 elderly men sat opposite each other, engaged in a game of chess. As soon as Grandpa Oliver saw me, he slammed his chess piece down onto the board, disrupting the entire game, and immediately grabbed his cane to walk toward me. Behind him, the other elderly man shouted in protest, "Oliver, you shameless old man, you cheated again." Grandpa Oliver's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as he scanned me from head to toe. "Good child, you've suffered so much." Those simple words miraculously washed away decades of pain and grievance in my heart. I reached out and hugged him tightly, finally allowing my tears to fall. A mix of bitterness and newfound joy surged within me. I told Grandpa Oliver everything about the village, and as he listened, his anger grew stronger. Even the stranger beside him became visibly outraged. "Girl, leave this matter to me. That man will have no choice but to divorce you, whether he wants to or not. This is the new society. Women in our country are not to be trampled on." Only then did Grandpa Oliver introduce me to his old friend, Professor Mario. According to Grandpa Oliver, Professor Mario's wife worked for the Women's Federation, advocating for women's rights. Hearing my experience, she felt heartbroken and, without hesitation, submitted an application for a forced divorce through the authorities. When Professor Mario learned that I had been admitted to Tsinghua University, his eyes filled with admiration. Before leaving, he gave me a meaningful look and urged me to focus on my studies. Later, Grandpa Oliver told me that Professor Mario was a professor in Tsinghua's chemistry department, and in this lifetime, the field I wanted to study most was chemistry. Chapter 8. There was still 1 month before Tsinghua University started. I couldn't refuse Grandpa Oliver's enthusiastic invitation, so I stayed at his house. At first, I worried that his family might have objections, but to my surprise, they were just as kind as he was. Grandpa Oliver had 2 sons and a daughter, all of whom were already married. In the evenings, the grandchildren filled the house with laughter and joy. My uncles talked to me about my academic future, while my aunt pulled me into a warm hug, full of affection. Ever since my parents passed away, I had never felt this kind of warmth again. To repay their kindness, I helped tutor Grandpa Oliver's grandchildren every day. Time passed quickly, and soon it was the first day of university. I bid farewell to Grandpa Oliver and decided to stay in Tsinghua's dormitory. But at his insistence, I agreed to return once a week for a family dinner. Before moving into the dormitory, I mailed 2 paternity test results and a letter. Little did I know that my departure had caused complete chaos in David's household. At first, When David and Sandra returned to the village, they didn't even notice that I wasn't on the truck. After all, they were too busy focusing on each other to spare me a second thought. It wasn't until one of the babies soiled an entire bed that David's mother started yelling for me to clean up. But no one responded. That was when David finally realized he had left me behind in the city. His mother panicked and told him to go back and find me. But David waved her off, feeling she was making a big deal out of nothing. She's not a child. It's not like she can't find her way home. With that, he turned away, completely unconcerned, and continued flirting with Sandra. Not even the baby's cries could distract him. Sandra, on the other hand, did feel a little sorry for the kids, but the overwhelming stench made her, a pampered woman who never did chores, step back in disgust. She refused to lift a finger, leaving David's mother to clean up the mess alone. As she scrubbed and cursed my name, she made up her mind. If I dared to come back, she would make me suffer. But after 4 or 5 days, I was still nowhere to be found. David's family finally realized something was wrong. David took the village chief's truck back to town to look for me. When the village chief noticed I wasn't with him, he asked, "Where's Lily? I didn't see her on the way back last time." David hesitated, then mumbled an excuse. "She's visiting her cousin in the city." The village chief found this suspicious. He knew about my adoption and how I had no real family in the city. Once they reached the county, David asked his army buddies for help in searching for me. From morning until night, they searched everywhere, asking around, but no one had seen me. David took a deep breath, his patience wearing thin. He had never expected Lily to cause him so much trouble, but he swallowed his anger and kept looking. Finally, at the ticket booth, a middle-aged woman paused when she heard his description. "You're talking about a young girl wearing a yellow blouse, with a ponytail? A bit taller than me?" She gestured to indicate the height difference. David's heart pounded with excitement. "Yes, Auntie. Do you know where she went?" The woman grinned. "She took a train to Beijing, said she's going to university." The words hit David like a bolt of lightning. Lily went to the capital? And she's going to university? What about their family? Chapter 9. David stumbled back home in a daze. His mother rushed forward, sensing something was wrong. David, filled with frustration and disbelief, roared at her the moment he saw her. "Mom, why didn't you tell me Lily got into university? She's in Beijing now, the capital. She's never coming back." His mother's face turned deathly pale. His father's pipe slipped from his fingers, hitting the ground with a sharp snap, shattering in two. Sandra, who had just walked out of the bedroom holding a baby, stared in complete shock. David's mother staggered back a few steps, collapsing onto a chair, her voice filled with regret. "It's my fault. I should have hidden her ID. I should have seen that she wanted to run." Then, as if suddenly realizing something, her eyes widened in horror. They hadn't received any money or ration coupons this month. Her voice sharpened with rage. "She must have gone to Oliver's house in Beijing. We're going to get her back. She belongs to our family in life, and she'll be our family's ghost in death. Oliver has no right to steal my daughter-in-law." David's father picked up his broken pipe, carefully wiping the pieces with his sleeve. His expression was calm, his demeanor stern and authoritative, as if he were the patriarch of an important clan. "Yes, we need to bring her back." He then glanced at the twins in Sandra's arms. "Otherwise, who's going to take care of my grandchildren?" David finally snapped back to reality. He and Sandra were both leaving the village in a month. There was no way they could sacrifice their futures to stay behind and raise the children. His jaw tightened, and he nodded in agreement. "When the village chief goes to the city in 2 days, I'll go buy train tickets to Beijing." That night, Sandra lay in bed, her mind restless. She turned over and whispered to David, "I never expected Lily to get into university." "I wonder which one?" David, irritated, snapped. What kind of school could she possibly get into? Probably just some vocational college. As if the mere thought of her was embarrassing, his gaze softened as he looked at Sandra, treating her like a precious gem. "It doesn't matter where she got accepted. She'll never be better than you. Someone like her is just wasting money on education. Unlike you, you have a bright future ahead of you." Sandra smiled smugly, basking in the praise. After all, in this era, getting into university was extremely rare, and being admitted to a teacher's training school in Beijing? People from miles around envied her and praised her accomplishments. David was still dreaming about dragging Lily back home, until the next day, when the village chief arrived with devastating news. Lily had sent a forced divorce application from the capital. Chapter 10. The moment David's mother heard the news, she almost fainted. Even David's usually composed father lost his temper, slamming the table and shouting, "Outrageous! Absolutely outrageous!" David's mind was in complete chaos. Desperately, he turned to the village chief, hoping for some kind of help, but the village chief only shook his head with difficulty. "David, this is an official notice from the higher-ups. There's nothing I can do, it's final. I heard Lily got into Tsinghua University. You all better stop bothering her from now on." When the village chief first received the official document, he was stunned. After all, he had seen plenty of official notices before, but this was the first time he had ever encountered a forced divorce order from the Women's Federation. He and the other village officials studied the document for hours, trying to find a loophole, but there was none. It was not a negotiation. It was an official declaration. The document clearly stated that Lily and David's marriage was dissolved, and that both parties were now free to remarry. Attached to the notice was a list of all the money and ration coupons sent to David's family over the years. The staggering amount made even the village chief's jaw drop. David's family was truly insatiable. That sum alone could have raised 10 girls like Lily comfortably. Even Lily's education expenses had been accounted for, a clear sign that her benefactor had always intended for her to have a bright future. But what did David's family do instead? They had forced Lily to drop out of school early and marry David, and treated her terribly all these years. The villagers had all seen it. The ragged clothes Lily wore, the endless work she did, the way David's parents never appreciated her. Looking at David's parents, their greasy faces and indulgent lifestyles, it was clear where all that money had gone. Thankfully, Lily had proven herself, even with no support. She had self-studied her way into Tsinghua University. David's parents shifted uncomfortably under the village chief's gaze, but he didn't bother staying long. After handing over the divorce papers, he left immediately, leaving behind the humiliated David family, sitting in their hall, at a complete loss. That girl. She's really not coming back. David's mother clung to one last shred of hope. David felt like he had been punched in the gut. For the first time in his life, he felt truly empty inside. Sandra, meanwhile, was boiling with jealousy. She had never imagined that someone like Lily, the same girl she had looked down on, would actually get into the country's top university. Just days ago, she had boasted in front of Lily about her own university admission, but Lily had remained unfazed. Now, Sandra realized, Lily had probably been secretly mocking her all along. Chapter 11. My senior, Eric, and I walked out of the laboratory together, still discussing the formulas from our latest experiment. Suddenly, a female classmate ran over, looking at me with urgency. "Lily, your family is waiting for you at the school gate. They said something happened at home." My heart skipped a beat. Could something have happened to Grandpa Oliver? I quickly said goodbye to Eric and rushed toward the gate. But before I could even reach the entrance, I heard a familiar voice shouting, "I'm here to take my wife home. Who are you to stop me?" "Lily! Lily!" "David." I stepped forward, and the moment he saw me, his eyes lit up with excitement. "Lily, hurry and come home. Mom and Dad are sick." My expression remained blank. If Aunt and Uncle are sick, they should see a doctor. If things are really that bad, Sandra can take care of them. Why are you coming to me? David's face stiffened at the way I addressed his parents, but he quickly thickened his skin and pleaded again. "Lily, no matter how much resentment you have toward us, surely it's time to let it go. My parents raised you all these years. Shouldn't you at least repay their kindness? Besides, taking care of one's in-laws is a wife's duty. Even if you got into Tsinghua, that doesn't mean you can be ungrateful." The moment he said this, the onlookers, students from my university, began whispering among themselves. However, being rational university students, no one blindly took sides without knowing the full story. At that moment, Sandra stepped forward from where she had been hiding, ready to put on her act. Lily, I know you're jealous of how close David and I are, but we're just cousins. How could you abandon your children and in-laws like this? Do you have any idea how much the children miss their mother? With that, Sandra picked up two filthy, crying children from a rickety tricycle. The babies were wailing loudly, their ragged clothes making them look especially pitiful. She placed them in front of the crowd, their miserable cries echoing through the air. This time, the onlookers hesitated. Lily, if this is true, you should go back and take care of your family. Yeah, the children are innocent. If you gave birth to them, you have a responsibility. Education is important, but so is family. This man seems to really love you. I let out a cold laugh. I didn't bother arguing with my classmates, because I knew they were merely being misled by appearances. But public opinion was not something only David could manipulate. I turned to him and asked, David, did your unit dismiss you? Otherwise, how would you have the time to come all the way here to harass me? Then, I shifted my gaze to Sandra. And you? What happened? Did you not end up going to university? Or did your little affair and illegitimate twins get exposed? David and Sandra's faces turned red with embarrassment and anger. I knew it. I had hit the mark perfectly. Before the semester started, I had foreseen this situation. I knew that a simple divorce order wouldn't be enough to deter this shameless family. So, I had sent anonymous reports to both David's military unit and Sandra's university, exposing their immoral behavior. 1 month later, their dreams were crushed. The army expelled David, and Sandra was rejected from her university. After all, places like the military and top universities had strict moral standards. How could they allow such scandalous individuals to remain? When David's mother received the news, she was so furious that she fell ill. His father, already suffering from chronic lung disease, collapsed completely from the shock. With 2 neglected children to take care of, David and Sandra were overwhelmed, running around like headless chickens. And while they were drowning in misery, they imagined me, living a peaceful and successful life in Beijing, studying at a prestigious university. The injustice of it all burned them. So, they brought the children and came all the way to Beijing, to drag me back into their nightmare. Chapter 12. I took out the paternity test results and the financial records detailing all the money that had been sent to David's family over the years. The watching students finally realized the truth. The anger in their eyes shifted. Now, they turned on David and Sandra, even though they were intellectuals and well-educated. Their words were still sharp and unforgiving. So you two were the ones crying wolf first? Do you really not see how pathetic you are? One is shameless, and the other is thick-skinned, truly a match made in heaven. Lily was like a phoenix that fell into a chicken coop. How did she end up with such a family of bloodsuckers? David and Sandra's faces turned red with humiliation. Something in their words must have struck a nerve, because David suddenly snapped. He lunged at me in a fury, grabbing my wrist and dragging me several meters away before I could even react. Just as I was about to cry for help, bang! David was knocked to the ground with a solid punch. It was Eric. He stepped forward, shielding me behind him. David looked up from the ground, his expression twisting with rage as he saw the scene before him. He pointed at Eric and spat furiously. So this is your lover? Huh? You abandoned our family for him? David tried to lunge at Eric again, but this time, Eric easily knocked him down once more. Perhaps it was school camaraderie. Or maybe it was because David's actions were simply too disgusting. But even the normally gentle and scholarly students started joining in, taking the opportunity to kick and shove him while he was down. By the time the campus security finally arrived, David was bruised and bloodied, barely able to stand. Sandra rushed forward, helping him up. I took a step forward, my voice ringing out clearly. David, I don't owe your family anything. The money your family spent raising me? It wasn't even a tenth of what Grandpa Oliver sent you. I ate your food. Yes, but I never slacked off on housework. It was you and Sandra who had an affair and bore children, so why are you blaming me for leaving? Everyone has their own path. From now on, we are nothing to each other. If you ever harass me again, don't blame me for showing no mercy. David stared at me in shock, as if he had never truly seen me before. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, with his head hanging low, he turned around and left with Sandra. From that day on, he never dared to bother me again. Chapter 13. 4 years later, I stepped out of Professor Mario's office, clutching our latest research findings in my hands. Professor Mario had just told me this research would significantly break the foreign blockade against our country. In the field of bomb technology, we were on the verge of a major breakthrough. A wave of good news surged forward, making my heart feel like a joyful bird, fluttering nonstop. That evening, Eric invited me to dinner, and I agreed without hesitation. During the meal, Eric congratulated me on my achievements, his eyes filled with pride. I laughed, looking at him, and here I thought you were teasing me. Without your help, I would still have a long way to go before reaching this result. Eric smiled, his gaze carrying an unmistakable warmth. Feeling flustered, I quickly looked away, but he reached out and held my hand. I understand you, he said gently. Your heart is devoted to chemistry, and you will dedicate your life to it. But don't forget to look at the people around you, okay? I lowered my head, my heart pounding wildly. After a long moment, I nodded solemnly. Later, Grandpa Oliver told me about David's downfall. After losing his position in the military, he drowned himself in alcohol, wasting his days in a drunken haze, refusing to work, refusing to take care of his children. Sandra, having missed her chance at university, was soon burdened by 2 kids in David's family. She lasted less than a year before running away, never looking back. That left David alone, struggling to raise his children and care for his ailing parents. But David was never a responsible man. Years later, his neglect left his parents bedridden with bedsores, writhing in pain day and night, until they slowly withered away and died, abandoned and suffering. As for his children, with no guidance, they skipped school, fought in the streets, and became troublemakers. One day, a villager who knew the truth sneered at them. Your real mother wasn't even half as capable as your foster mother. You'll be just as useless as her. Hearing that their so-called foster mother was successful and living in the city, the 2 children threw tantrums every day, demanding to be taken to Beijing to find me. Perhaps it was the alcohol, or maybe it was David's sheer foolishness, but he forgot all the words I had once told him. He immediately bought 3 train tickets to Beijing, but before they could even board, David, dead drunk, collapsed onto the train tracks, and just like that, he was gone. When his 2 children finally found me, they looked like filthy little beggars, covered in dirt. Tears streamed down their faces as they sobbed. Before he died, our father kept repeating one thing over and over. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I want a second chance. Lily, wait for me. By then, I had already been awarded the National Outstanding Contribution Award, making me the youngest academician at the Research Institute. I told the children the truth, no matter how much they protested. I sent them to an orphanage, because if I allowed my heart to soften for them, I would be betraying the girl I used to be. As I held my trophy, standing beneath the flashing lights of countless cameras, I felt as if I could see my past self, standing before me. Her lips moved silently, forming a single phrase. Keep moving forward. Don't look back. From the crowd, Eric stood among those applauding me, his gaze steady and unwavering. At that moment, I thought to myself, I will never look back.